Sorry, it's taking a little bit.
It's okay.
Oh, looks like it's live streaming.
Okay. So welcome everybody. Happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with everyone out there in Facebook land. Welcome to the Museum of Northern Arizona. We're doing a virtual panel today talking about Indigenous Futurisms. My name is Tony Thibodeau. I'm collections manager here at the museum. I also served as curator for the Forces with Our People exhibit that was focused on Star Wars and Native artists. But more importantly, I am a big fan of all of our Indigenous creators that we have on the panel today. So I am super excited to geek out with these guys today. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to do some introductions of all of our panelists, and then we'll move on to some questions. First, we have Dr. Lee Francis IV. Lee is from Laguna, Pueblo in New Mexico. Lee is the head Indigenerd and CEO of Native Realities, the only Native and Indigenous pop culture company in the United States with the hope to change the perceptions of Native and Indigenous people through dynamic and imaginative pop culture representations. He has been published in multiple publications ranging from poetry to short stories. His first comic is Six Killer, which debuted in June of 2018, and Ghost River, which was published in 2019. And both have been lauded throughout the US and abroad. He is a strong advocate for Native youth with a focus on community literacy and entrepreneurship. And he lives in Albuquerque with his family. He is joining us today from the road, somewhere near Mesa Verde, I believe. So welcome, Lee. Good to have you here today. Next up is Ryan Singer. Ryan is a Diné Navajo artist painter based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, creating artwork based on his Navajo heritage and incorporating pop culture elements, including science fiction imagery. He weaves stories of his childhood memories with nostalgic iconography. He's been included in the Indigenous Futurisms movement, but has been drawing Star Wars characters since 1977. Of course, the critical year when the first film was released, right? He has participated in numerous museum exhibitions and gallery shows. He recently had a solo exhibition at the Form and Concept Gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His artwork is in collections of several museums and collectors worldwide, including this museum here. And Ryan has garnered several awards, including from the renowned Swayaz Santa Fe Indian Market. He is currently attending CNM with plans to transfer to UNM to acquire a BFA in Art Studio. I also wanted to mention Ryan had several prominent pieces in the Forces with Our People exhibit here at the museum, and we'll talk about a couple of those pieces today. And one thing I forgot to do when I started this was to share my screen. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so there's some images of Lee's work right there. And it's not advancing. Oh wait, here we go. There we go. Some more images of Lee's work. And there's some images of Ryan's work. And that's one of the pieces that was in the Force exhibit, Tuba City Spaceport. And then Decolonized Ewok, one of his more recent pieces that was in the Force exhibit. So we'll get back to those and talk about those. Next up is Dr. Darcie Littlebadger. Welcome, Darcie. Darcie is a Lipan Apache writer with a PhD in oceanography. Her critically acclaimed debut novel, Alatsue, was featured in Time magazine as one of the best 100 fantasy novels of all time, and is a Nebula and Lodestar finalist. I just finished it this past weekend, highly recommended. It was absolutely wonderful. Her second fantasy novel, A Snake Falls to Earth, is coming in October 2021, this October, so hoping we can get a few tidbits from Darcie about her next novel. Darcie's short fiction, nonfiction, and comics have appeared in multiple places, including Marvel's Voices, Indigenous Voices #1, Nightmare Magazine, Strange Horizons, and The Dark. She is currently engaged to a veterinarian named T. Welcome, Darcie. Next up is Nanobah Becker. Nanobah is also Diné and is an award-winning filmmaker. Her short films have screened at festivals in the US and internationally, including the Sundance Film Festival, the Tribeca Film Festival, and Imaginative Film and Media Arts Festival, and recently have been acquired by institutions such as the Baltimore Museum of Art Nanobah is a citizen of the Navajo Nation, was born and raised in Albuquerque, and currently calls Tuvangar, Los Angeles, home. Welcome, Nanobah. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So I thought we'd start things off a little bit today by talking about what Indigenous Futurisms is, or what is an interpretation of Indigenous Futurisms, especially for a lot of our viewers who maybe aren't really aware of that term or that movement. I think of it as an artistic movement that crosses different media, but centers Indigenous experience in a sci-fi or fantasy narrative, often reimagining a decolonized future. My understanding is the term was coined by Dr. Grace Dillon, professor of Anishinaabe and European descent in the Indigenous Nations Studies program at Portland State University in 2012 in this book, Walking the Clouds, which is an anthology and collection of Indigenous science fiction, short fiction. I think it's safe to say, though, that now the movement has grown in the almost 10 years since this book was released, and now includes Indigenous creators from all over the media spectrum, which is what we've tried to do today in representing, you know, the panelists that we have here today. We're trying to represent that spectrum of media. So I'd like to start by posing the same question to each of you, and whoever wants to take a shot at it first. What is your interpretation of Indigenous Futurisms, and how do you see your work fitting into this movement or not?
I can go.
Thanks, Darcie.
Yeah, and I actually, a lot of what you said is also what I consider Indigenous Futurisms to be, and that added element to me, the acknowledgement of the continuity between our past and our present and our future is very important, especially in what I write, where even in these YA fantasy books that I wouldn't personally call Indigenous Futurisms, they do have that element of acknowledging just how important different periods of times are and how they influence each other. And especially how we are going to continue to thrive in the future, which is something that is often ignored by, especially in the past, by genre writers. I guess when I was reading science fiction and fantasy as a child, it was rare for me to find Apache characters who were living in the future. You know, they were usually in historical type fiction in the 1800s. I do think that's really cool. And also, as a scientist, one thing that I have to struggle with sometimes is to convince people that we should care about many generations in the future. I am an earth scientist studying biological oceanography, but I also looked at things like sea level change and ocean acidification. So I do have this great awareness of how the earth is going to change and how it's in our power right now to make it the best possible future for generations going forward. But as a student, I was once in a discussion with other students, and one of them actually said, "I know things will be bad, but I'll be dead. Why should I care?" And the thing is, we should care, because we should be recognizing our power to make life better for people who will exist beyond our lifetimes, and that's important. And as a fiction writer, I try to just emphasize that, because really is my life's work is emphasizing that we should care. But yeah, that's my take on Indigenous Futurisms.
Great, thanks, Darcie. Somebody else, Ryan?
Yeah, I kind of want to just touch on something that was similar, what Darcie just said. Right out of high school, I went right into forestry. I studied forestry, and I work with the Forest Service. And I learned a lot about the deforestation, clear cutting, all the impacts that affected the environment. And I started to see a lot of like this trend when I was studying like the soil, around Grand Canyon. There was a big kind of like a drought from like the 50s and 60s, like the soil was drying up basically. And I remember even back when I was studying forestry, working with the Forest Service, there wasn't as many forest fires as I remember there are now. They're like all over the place. So I think about Native Americans always having the idea of protecting the environment, always giving back to the environment, respecting Mother Earth, respecting where we live at. And if we take something, we always give something back. And is like the opposite of what the capitalist idea of America, you know, how they take as much as they can for whatever profit, and they just keep taking and taking. And this can't keep going, you know. So I see like this trend even from like being in school right out of high school, and then now it's gotten worse. So I think about the future of indigenous, like when I think of indigenous futurisms, I think about that future. What's going to be happening 20 years from now? Are we going to be around? Will we blow up the whole place? You know, it's just there'll be a nuclear holocaust, apocalypse. Who knows? It's like, or will the earth take care of us before that happens? And I think about the pandemic last year happening. I think that was kind of a wake up call for us, like for the whole world, like globally, and indigenous views. I think I think that we need to think about how we should protect the earth and respect it. And I think that at some point in the future, maybe those indigenous ways will come in handy to keep us alive, to help us survive. So that's where I see like the future of indigenous kind of like coming to aid, you know, for the population, the earth. So hopefully it doesn't come to that point, but the way things are going with Western culture and the capitalist society, I don't know how we're going to change it unless something really bad happens. So that's kind of my take on that. And I think artwork is kind of helping. Like for me, when I do artwork, I don't want to make it dark and really ominous or whatever, but I wanted to make it fun and enjoyable. But at the same time, I want to just throw in these little clues and little things in there so people can kind of pick up on these ideas of the future or what could happen. So that's my take.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Nanobah, do you want to take a crack at that question?
Sure. Yaat a Nanobah Becker kit legit nishle Billigana Bashichin, Twitter Dashe, Do Billigana a Dashanala. Thank you once again, Tony, and the Museum of Northern Arizona be here. That's kind of a tricky question for me because I feel like I made this one film and it's been around for a while now, and so it's like become part of this movement, I guess, which from everything that Darcie and Ryan said and what Tony said, and with this particular project, I guess I can speak a little bit about this one, is that I was really trying to think about the future, the near future from a Navajo perspective. So thinking about time, how do we think about time from a Navajo perspective? How is that different from the Western way of thinking about time, how time is cyclical, and how the past and the future kind of coexist and overlap. So not only just thinking about the future with Native people and what it might be like, or in a sort of genre way, but approaching that topic from, at least in my case, this perspective of a Navajo viewpoint. So, yeah, I mean, I hope I answered your question, but so I know you were saying before we started that you've seen the film a couple times, and I tried to put a lot in that like 10-minute film. So hopefully we can talk a little bit more about what I mean by doing that from a Navajo perspective.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get back to more about that film. Lee, you want to address the question? And actually, this kind of leads into one of the questions I had for you specifically about Indigenous Comic-Con and now Indigipop X and how that kind of crosses over or influences each other in terms of the Indigenous Futurisms movement.
Yeah, thank you. Guatsi Hapa, everybody out there in Cyberland. I would like to, I'll say our land acknowledgement as digital natives. We own it all. So we're here. We're not going anywhere. We've been here since before. We're going to be here long after. Ties right into Indigenous Futurisms. So right now I'm in ancient Pueblo and territory where I'm on the road, but I always like to throw that out. But when we're in Zoom, I always think it's amazing because like all these Zoom and, like the digital meetings, I was just like, it's always native folks, man, we're always around. We're here everywhere. We just exist in the sphere. It's great. So yeah, to the question, I think it ties into Indigenous Futurisms as a concept, like the academic side as well, is to really be, I think it's a philosophical fundamental. Like I didn't really understand it. And when I sat down and read the book by Dr. Dillon, and I started really interacting with a lot of these folks coming off of the first Comic-Con and now Indigipop X, was this understanding that it is about the philosophical framework of Indigenous, ways of being and knowing, which is, time, this post-colonialism, anti-colonialism. How are we like not only empowering ourselves, but reframing our own existence, a world that, is still bent on erasing us. We just saw that recently on the news with some previous people from the state of Pennsylvania. This is the things that we deal with. And Indigenous Futurisms is, I think, the most positive counterpoint to that, right? Because it's not saying that what I saw too much in the work coming into this was there was a fetishization of tragedy in terms of popular culture representations of Native people. Well, we continue to focus on was dead and dying Indians, right? This idea of just like, oh, look at the great chiefs. Well, they were people from 100 years ago, and they're no longer alive. Any of us alive, of course. But it became this focus on almost like we want to say like a death cult, right? And not even from us, but when we're constantly bombarded with it, we begin to internalize that. As Native people, if you're constantly shown, like, if you live by a graveyard, you think, well, I guess we live by ghosts, like that's how we're always portrayed or had been previously in popular culture. It was a terrible way to grow up. And so, the last 10 years, the last 15, 20 years, as this movement began to develop, because I think it's a movement, not only in art and music, but it's a cultural movement. It's a spiritual movement. It's a philosophical movement, has been all of these wonderful people that I'm sharing the screen with, and how we've been able to communicate and articulate a new way that it's not about fetishizing us. And it may be full of, zombies, it may be full of aliens, it may be full of anything, but we're still around. We're still going to be around. We were around, and you're not going to stop that flow through. Like, we're not going anywhere. So I think that was really, in essence, a lot of what we tried to put together with the Comic-Con. We tried to put together with IPX. We had, in sort of the one line, it was the, kind of the sci-fi fantasy line, because those are always grouped together. But bringing everybody in was really about having these conversations with artists and futurists and dreamers and Native creatives, and and bringing folks everybody into this space, right? So, and I'm kind of vamping just to make sure my connection is still good. So I think that that's one of the things that really have tried to work through in terms of what we were doing with IPX and the convos. So I'll leave it there.
Lee, it's I think your connection is choppy with us, but Darvin's telling me that the connection going out over Facebook is solid. So I think we're good. So we might lose you back and forth But I think our viewers get a pretty solid, solid connection there. This brings me kind of to my next point about why the future is such a fertile topic for Indigenous creators to work in. I know some of you, Lee, I know, has written some like more historical fiction with a focus on events that take place in the past. So I'm wondering, like, how do those approaches differ in terms of portraying indigenous experience? What are the kind of strengths and weaknesses of, working in historical fiction versus science fiction? And this isn't just for Lee, anybody can jump in on that one.
I'll kick it off real quick, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact of, when you're thinking about indigenous narratives, that they're all created in that slipstream, that Dr. Dillon talks about in terms of Indigenous Futurisms. That slipstream is really important, that the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I write, if you look, if you read through Ghost River, I'm a character in Ghost River. I wrote myself into the comic. I wrote with Shoyo, my illustrator, the illustrator I work with, into the comic. We wrote our experience into the comic, and we portrayed a future of Native people as living, as beautiful and brilliant, coming off of this really horrific event in 1763. So I think a part of it, when you're even talking about, you can fetishize the history, but I think futurisms ties in because you're casting, saying, this is what happened, or at least the way that I write it, I was like, this is what happened, and we're still here, we're still going forward, you ain't gonna stop us. So that's how I've kind of portrayed the historical pieces, that there's always a moment where it focuses at the end of everything that I write around living. I won't necessarily say joyful, but at least living in invigorated, empowered Native and Indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Lee. Anybody else want to address that question in terms of, portraying Indigenous experience in a futuristic way versus either historically or in a more contemporary way? Nanobah, I know you've done some documentary film making. How does that differ in terms of portraying Indigenous experience from the more speculative kind of work?
Well, my first short film was actually, my second, I guess, was a period piece that was set in about like the 1940s, 30s on the Navajo Nation. It's all in the Navajo language. So that was based on a story that my mother told me about when missionaries came through. And for me, that was like, the way elders will tell a story and they'll just like say 3 words and like it sticks with you for like a lifetime. So she was telling me about this incident where these missionaries came through her community out on Eastern Navajo, where my family's from Ojo Encino area. And they somehow convinced or persuaded or forced this medicine man to throw away his medicine bundle. And then he died. That was a whole story. I'm like, whoa, that is like, that's so intense. And I felt so compelled to tell that story and to get those images out there as a way to kind of like communicate with other people. And I guess, which it kind of ended up being when I show it to like certain, like an Indigenous audience, they have a certain reaction versus other, a non-Indigenous audience. So, but it was so important for me to look back and to tell that story and to make sure that people heard it and to hear, the things that elders have to say. So when I was asked to submit a proposal to make this short film, The Sixth World, I hadn't really thought about writing a story and placing Native people in the future. So that was really exciting to me. But the way I work is I have a more drama background. So I really wanted it to be kind of very realistic. So, and yes, just like Lee was saying, putting us in the future. No, we're not dead. I'm sorry. We're still here. You're never going to get rid of us, especially Navajos, as you know, we're like literally everywhere. But to think about the Navajo, where we're at now, we have a Navajo nation. What would that look like if it became a fully realized nation state of its own? And I was thinking with its own military, for good or bad, you know, because the choices where we're at right now, we could go one way or we could go the other way. But of course, everything is not black and white, right? It's so once again, I hope I'm answering your question there.
No, you
But
are.
to put Indigenous people in these positions where we don't ever see them today, but make it normal and not commenting on it as in like, oh my God, like this is so unusual, but just to make it, oh, okay, whatever. Yeah. You
Well,
all
that's
are in the future
really,
doing all this stuff too.
that's implied in the film. I mean, for those folks who haven't seen the film, I will try not to give any spoilers, but there's a lot of things, like little things in the film that really imply that, there's mention of Navajo Nation astronaut program, things like that, that kind of imply that the Navajo Nation is its, very, very powerful sovereign nation. It's also, there's something that mentioned that, oh, we couldn't do this project without the Navajo Nation's backing. Like they're basically bankrolling this entire mission to Mars. And so it's little things like that that kind of clue you in that, this is a different Navajo Nation than what we're thinking of in terms of the past. I'm going to get to a few individual questions, if you guys don't mind. We can come back to some of the more general ones. Ryan, I wanted to hit you with this one. You've expressed this idea of parallel universes before as being influential for some of your work, including the Tuba City Spaceport piece, which of course was included in the Force exhibit. Can you talk about this idea of where parallel universes came from and how it drives the narratives that you create in your paintings?
Well, I've always been into sci-fi since I was a kid. My older sister got me really influenced me into, she's 5 years older than me. So she really got me to start watching like horror movies and sci-fi movies, probably when I was like 3 or 4, like really like started to mess up my mind basically, which, I thank her for later on, but it's like, I was watching like the Wolfman, Frankenstein, all those movies like that, those black and white movies when I was a kid. And I used to have nightmares, and, Star Trek was around, Godzilla, all those movies it had to do with, I guess, being an artist and just having like this crazy, incredible imagination. So the sci-fi just got stuck in my head. So basically, like I could walk around and just think of sci-fi things happening all the time. Like basically that's what I do. I mean, I'm 47 years old now and I walk down the street and all these ideas are just popping around inside my head. So, like I just started thinking about it. Like one day when I was painting I think it was like 10 years ago when I came up with a Tuba City Spaceport idea. I was listening to this podcast on parallel universes and the theories and all these like multiverses, and just listening to it while I was painting. And then as I was painting, I wanted to do this image of this like 19th century Navajo scene at Tuba City with the Star Wars characters from 1977, and kind of immerse them, have them trading, talking, doing whatever, like in a regular day back in the on their trading posts. So that was kind of my idea. And as I was listening to the podcast, it became a real thing inside my head. Like this could really be happening in a whole nother universe. These things could be happening at the same time. Like the idea was like, you could be walking down the street, something could pop into your mind, and then you could split into a whole nother universe and go into a whole nother parallel universe, which is in a whole nother dimension that we can't see or touch. And it just keeps going and going and going. So as I was listening to it, it's like anything's possible. Any of these paintings, anything I do can be possible, so that kind of just leaves like thousands and thousands of ideas to come up with as far as artwork, using any kind of sci-fi imagery, any kind of toy, nostalgic imagery I remember as a kid, and then kind of mixing it with my childhood upbringing, living on the reservation, just meshing them together. So that's kind of where I get all that stuff. So I'm constantly just thinking of ideas all the time. Sometimes I dream them. Sometimes they just pop in my head when I'm like not even thinking about that stuff. So, and those are like the best times when you're just you're not trying to focus on it. It just pops into your head. And usually that's when I have to like grab my phone, text myself the idea or take a note or write it down somewhere because I'll forget it. So that's kind of how I work, I guess. But it's constantly right there, just kind of like spinning around in my head.
Awesome, cool. We'll come back and talk about decolonize Ewok in a little bit, but I wanted to jump over to Darcie. Your most recent book, Alatsue, nominated for several science fiction awards, as we mentioned, including a Nebula Award. Congratulations on the nominations, it's fantastic. Can you talk about the experience of receiving that kind of high profile attention for your work? And then I also wanted to ask about you kind of, how you came about writing for a YA audience rather than kind of a broader audience, and how you approach, a YA audience, separate like from some of your other work.
Yeah, sure thing. I gotta say briefly, I laughed when you said Navajo everywhere because my fiance is Navajo. Yeah, we're planning our wedding. We're actually had to delay it a couple times. We're gonna do a really small, like traditional thing on Key's home on the res. And it's been fun because I'm also like incorporating like Lipan Apache specific traditions with the very like Navajo specific traditions, and we're gonna have this fusion. So it's gonna be cool. But yes, to answer your question, first of all, Alatsue is published by a new indie publisher, right? It's Levine Carrito, and actually it's part of their inaugural line. So it's among the first books that they released. And I did make the choice because Levine Carrito split off from Scholastic. Essentially, Arthur Levine left Scholastic, started his own publisher. And when I sold Alatsue, I sold it to him when he was still at Scholastic. So I had this opportunity to either stay with Scholastic or go with Arthur and my editor, Nick. And the reason that I chose to go with them, Levine Carrito, is because I did feel that they respected my stories. They understood what I wanted to do with Alatsue. And to me, that is the most important thing about publishing these stories is that I'm able to work with people who respect them. But on the other hand, like sometimes it's difficult for indie publishers to kind of get that they like, you don't have these $1 million marketing budgets, so it was a pleasant surprise, first of all, and a testament just to the hard work of this new group, Arthur, Nick, Alex, Antonio, Megan, just this small group of people who are really passionate about these stories and have really been pushing for them. But when I started getting like Time Magazine and the Nebula, the Lone Star, which is the YA Hugo, it's not technically a Hugo, but it's given it the same. Also, it's Locust Award finalist and an Ignite Award finalist since I sent you the bio. For me, that was a big surprise. It was very overwhelming in a positive way, but it also just showed me how much readers have been doing to support Alatsue. Because these are nominations, like they're backed by people who read Alatsue and who are really fighting for it to get recognition, despite not having like a multi-million-dollar marketing budget or whatever. It's that word of mouth, indie bookstores, librarians, and that's wonderful because it shows what I suspected is that Alatsue is for all sorts of readers. Like I love hearing from young Native readers, especially I've even gotten Lipan readers. There's not too many of us compared to the population of the United States, but I've heard back from Lipan readers who are like, oh, I really enjoyed this. But you know, also non-native readers have said that. And what I've always suspected is that there is hunger for stories that have not been told. Because like as a reader, I enjoy reading about people who are different from me. So that's something that in the past, sometimes gatekeepers would use like, oh, there's not a lot of native stories, there's not a lot of native readers, we shouldn't be publishing it. And I think that the reception Alatsue has received has kind of proven that school of thought wrong. And I did choose to write for YA audience. I've always wanted to write at least part of my books for younger readers, just because of the importance that books had in my life when I was a teenager. But I actually did not start Alatsue thinking it was going to be a YA book. I started writing the book with Ellie, the main character. She's named after my grandma, by the way. Alatsue means hummingbird. So my grandmother was Anita Alatsue. So that's a fun fact there. But she was an adult originally, the character. And I got like 10,000, maybe 15,000 words in, and it just wasn't working. I couldn't write. And usually when that happens, it's because there's something about my story that is just not working with me at this kind of subconscious storyteller level. And just switching her to a teenager and just changing that element really fixed everything. And I do think it's because Ellie's voice had to be from this perspective of youth fighting for justice, because that really is what her story is about. It's got a lot of fun ghost dogs and monsters and even like fairy magic. But at the core, it's about a teenager who is trying to seek justice for her family in a world that is stacked against her. And part of that difficulty is that she's so young. So people don't always respect her like she should be respected. It's sometimes more difficult to do things, you know, because she has to ask permission to drive places, that kind of thing. And just having that just made the story work. So that's why Alatsue ended up being YA. And I'm glad it did.
Me too. And I mean, obviously I'm not a young adult, but I still fully enjoyed it. Real quick before I have a publishing question to move on to Lee, but I wanted to ask you, Darcie, you alluded to this a little bit about some of the autobiographical elements that you incorporated in the book. How much of you was in that character Alatsue and in the book?
Yeah, I say Ellie's a lot like cooler than I am. So that character is really based on the women in my life, my mother, my grandmother, and my great grandmother. They also inspired sixth grade. So
cool.
But I have to say that one element that I wouldn't necessarily call autobiographical, but that is inspired by my life is the way in many instances the family finds justice after these tragedies. A couple of things, that the main tragedy where the cousin is killed, I don't talk about it, but it is, you know, inspired by an instance in my family. And unfortunately, it did not end like Ellie's ending. She managed to get justice. But also there's this scene where the main character's mother actually fights back against these people who tried to abduct her. And that is based on something that happened to my mother. And thank goodness she was with a friend when these men tried to abduct her, and they ran off, so they escaped. But the men, to our knowledge, were never found. So a lot of these things is just me saying that it is possible to fight for a more just world. And I know a lot of readers probably have similar experiences where there's these things in their life or their family's life that they are still troubled by. So it was not just me working through my issues. Some of it was that I was like, oh man, I wish those potential abductors had been crushed by mammoth. That would have been amazing. But also
that was one of the most powerful stories in the book.
Oh, I loved writing that. I got to tell you, and my mom, she's given me permission to share that story, and she liked it too. And I got to say, it's a way to give people hope, and that's important for me as a writer.
Real quick, is pistachio ice cream your favorite flavor?
I like it a lot. I like things with cookie dough in it though. So maybe pistachio cookie dough, even though that's probably gross. I think I'd enjoy it.
When you read the book, you guys will understand. Okay, going to Lee, from your perspective as a publisher, we've talked about this a little bit, but what are some of the challenges to getting Indigenous creative works produced and distributed? And is there a downside to marketing work as Indigenous, potentially kind of narrowing your market? How do you kind of balance those concerns? Uh-oh. Can you guys hear me?
I think the
All right, we might have to come back to Lee because I think we might have lost his connection. All right, Lee, we're going to come back to you. I'm not sure if I can mute. Hey, Lee, go ahead and mute yourself and we'll come back to
it's
you.
faced
Okay?
right now.
Oh, there you are. Nope. Okay, let's
around the distribution.
all right, I think we might have completely lost. Oh, no, I think Lee got muted. Okay, we're gonna go to Nanobah. So I noticed, you know, of course, in the sixth world, you're obviously credited as director, but you're also credited as writer. Can you talk about the writing process for this film? Did it start out as a screenplay or was it adapted from something else that you had already written?
I just want to say, darn, because I really wanted to hear Lee's answer, because those are issues that I face as well. But so that, as I was telling you, I was asked to give a proposal for a short film that took place in the near future and that commented on American society. And it was funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. There's like 3 or 4 seasons online of this. It's called Future States. And so mine is technically like an episode in season 3. And all of the episodes are standalone. So yes, I wrote the script and I was, and once again, as someone who's like more of a drama person who has done historical fiction, I was like, what do I do? And so my favorite sci-fi film is 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so I was like, well, okay, I kind of want to do something in space. And so I was asking friends at home, I was like, oh, I have to do this proposal and I want to do it in space. I don't know what to do. And a friend of mine was like, Navajos on Mars. And I'm like, that's it. That is so it. And I got excited as well because at the time I had a friend who was a tour guide in Monument Valley. And I'm like, yes, I can go shoot Monument Valley and all this cool stuff came to my mind. And I knew that I wanted Corn to be the hero. And so that was where I started the script. And I studied a lot of like the first astronauts, the Mercury 5. And I took a lot of inspiration from that. And, but yeah, I wrote the script and that's where all these sort of crazy ideas came together to form that. And while I was writing it, I was getting notes and feedback from the producers who were in San Francisco. So they helped me along that process.
Cool. And did you have Janita Benally in mind as the lead or was she cast later in the project?
So Janita was cast later in the project. And this film premiered at Tribeca in 2011. So it's 10 years old now. And at the time, I basically felt like I knew who most of the actors were who might qualify for this role, but I was really looking for someone who could pull off the scene where she's chanting, where she kind of has that transformation. And I was aware of Janita as a musician. I'd seen her perform before. The first time I think I saw her perform, she was like 8 months pregnant with a bass guitar, and I just thought she was the coolest thing ever. And so I thought that she could pull off being a pilot. I had seen her on camera in different things, so I just visually, I felt that she could do it. And then knowing her background with the Benali family and their cultural performers and everything, and I knew that would not be an issue for her to pull off at all. So that was what I had in mind when I cast. So I just went up to her and asked her if she would be in it, and we worked on it, and Roger Willie's in it. So we actually had some time with Roger rehearsing in Flagstaff before she came here to the Los Angeles area where we shot it. So it was quite a bit to ask for her to star in this film, but she's so wonderful.
She was great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought she was perfect for that role. Okay, thanks, Nanobah. I think we might have Lee back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It is very windy here on the road, so if I cut out, it may be the end of me, but don't fear, I may be back. Who knows?
Did you hear the question that I had asked before about publishing?
Yeah, so publishing, I think one of the biggest things really is just about getting the work into the world, right? Like they're saying, the gatekeepers, it's places, it's your booksellers, it's your comic shops, it's your museums, to be quite frank. Like, here we are going through the national parks. The only one where I've seen like good solid native representation is here at Mesa Verde, but these are parks that are on traditional land, and they've got books, that there's no local representation in some of these spaces, right? So that's the main thing, because we've got so many creatives. The work that's being done by native creatives is astounding right now, but it's getting it beyond the small, like the small localities into the big world. And it doesn't have to hit like the big mainstream. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, like we're seeing Mission Impossible or something, but it's just getting these things front facing and listed. That's not just in the native section of the bookstore, but in the main section of the bookstore, right? And it shouldn't have to take, I mean this, because I love Alotsoe with Darcie, it shouldn't have to take getting on a New York Times bestseller list. It shouldn't have to do it's an astounding book, and it should, but like it should always be front facing. But why is that the litmus for native creatives to get their stuff put onto the main fiction shelf, right? It's not, it's in the native section. So I think that's part of what you were kind of alluding to, is like, yeah, I don't mind representing, but even in the native section, then it's filled with like a whole bunch of like Western writers, like folks that were like, like historical writers that were chronicling native people. That's like right next to, Darcie's up in the front section now, but in these other spaces, I'm like, that's where these folks are going to be seen, right? Like, so you're side by side. So I think that's the biggest thing. That's something that we've been really trying to resolve, is how do you have a distributor? Because even if you create the stuff, there's a gatekeeper that stops you from distributing the stuff. And then there's a gatekeeper at the bookstore. And then there's a gatekeeper over. So it's all of these gates that we have to keep overcoming. And I think that's the biggest thing that we face in publishing. And especially when you think of something like Indigenous Futurisms, where do you put that, right? Is it the native section? Is it the sci-fi section? Because it's different. It's not, it actually, because it spans so much, there isn't really a space to put it. But most of the time, the booksellers are going to default, because they got to be able to find a space to put it, because they're still thinking in like a big box mentality, rather than being like, hey, here's some really cool stuff we're going to put on these shelves. So like, at Red Planet, we're an all native bookstore. I was like, there isn't a specific native shelf. It's the shelves. It's wherever you look. That's what we're throwing down there for folks. And Ryan's been there, so he can represent. He knows what our shelves look like. What up? So yeah. So if the wind cuts me out, I just want to say super thank you. I will wrap my comments there, but I may be in and out, but I want to just say thank you before if anything happens to me, just know that I evaporated
We'll
into
keep
the
you in our
digital mist
thoughts.
like a goose.
Well, I just got the 10-minute warning, and I can't even believe that we just like went through that. So I think what I'll do is go to Ryan, because I had a question about decolonized Ewok, and then also kind of like what you're working on now. And then I think we'll just go around and talk about like what are you guys currently working on, new books that might be coming out, or new films that might be coming out, or what you're thinking about, down the line. So Ryan, you know, the decolonized Ewok piece, which we were very fortunate to be able to add to our collection here at the museum, has a more social message than some of your previous work. And I know that you're kind of exploring that in some of the work that you're doing in art school right now. How are you incorporating the social messaging in your work, and what are you thinking about down the line in terms of your work?
I think of it as a form of educating people, especially non-native people. We get for natives, we always get sort of like a bad rep. We get looked upon as kind of like lost people, or we don't exist, or we don't count, discounted. And historically, that wasn't the way. But since, taking the land, putting people through the boarding school experiment, all these different wars, trying to commit genocide. All these different things have affected how natives are today. The trauma that's generational, and I think that it's important to kind of tell that story, that history of the native people. And one way of doing it is making art. And one way of getting people to notice stuff is maybe using stuff that people can identify with right away, like the Ewoks from Star Wars. People will see that and recognize that right off and say, wow, that's pretty cool. And as they look at it, they start to figure out what's happening, what I'm trying to say with the piece. And what I'm trying to say is that there's a parallel. If you watch Return of the Jedi, there's a parallel way that the stormtroopers, the Empire are trying to take the Ewoks sort of land. They live in that forest, and they kind of control, part of their moon, I guess, Endor. And I think that's important to kind of see that parallel. As with natives, they did that with the indigenous population. They put them in boarding schools starting in the late 1800s. They cut their hair. They made them, put them on uniforms. They strict them from speaking their indigenous languages. They taught them Christian values, and they wanted them to assimilate them into the American population, where they would be productive, I guess, industrial workers, people working in construction, sort of jobs where you didn't have to use your mind as much, I guess. So that's one of the ways I wanted to make this piece, so people would see it and try to figure out what I was trying to say, and maybe look back at the history, and maybe get some of the reasons why indigenous people, are, have been affected by all this trauma. And in my semester this year, I did this series on toys from my past, nostalgic memories of toys, and I used them in native scenes, historical traumatic native scenes, where I did one with the Legos in the doing the Navajo long walk. I had like the cavalry guys on horseback, and the Navajos walking through the desert towards Bosco Redondo in New Mexico as a Lego scene, like almost like a play set. And the idea behind that was, again, like the educational aspect of what happened during the long walk. People can research and find out what happened back then, but also to teach about if there's historical trauma, there can also be, or inherited trauma, generational trauma. They can also be inherited resilience, inherited perseverance, and the ability to adapt and survive and go on. So that's what happened with the Navajos. They were able to go through the long walk. Many of them didn't survive, but the ones that did were able to keep the culture, keep the language, and survive and go back to the reservation where they, where we still exist today. So I think that's important to bring that about, being able to go through this sort of almost like a apocalyptic scenario, survive, and then come through it and still be able to tell a story. And what I'm trying to do with the artwork is also tell another story that's, I guess, I see today, and maybe that will be in the future, I think that that's important for just non-natives and non-natives, especially younger indigenous people. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to talk about.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. I'm really looking forward to your new work.
I got them up
Darcie,
on my fan page on Facebook.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Darcie, you want to talk about your new book coming out in the fall, Snake Falls to Earth, and maybe what you're working on in the future? Oh, you're still muted though.
Thank you.
It's always
I
gonna
knew
happen
I'd do
once,
that at
right?
least once. Yeah, Snake Falls to Earth is my next, I guess, big project. It's coming this October, and it is another YA fantasy book, but it's quite different from Alatsaway in that I decided, okay, I'm just going to go 100% Lipan storytelling tradition in this book, and I don't care if it's unusual. This is what I want to do. So it's told through the perspective of two different people. This cottonmouth teen from this land of like monsters and spirits that I invented, but it's based strongly on the stories that my mother told me. And then this near future teen named Nina, and their two stories combine eventually, and they help each other. But one really cool thing is that from the cottonmouth kid's perspective, every chapter, although it connects with a larger plot, can be a self-contained story. So it's be like Cottonmouth meets the Coyote Twins, so that sort of thing. And I am excited, also very nervous, because second books always, or at least my friends say that you never quite know how people are going to receive them, especially if they're different from your first book. And yeah, in terms of, there's a few comic projects also coming, and I can't say much about them now, but I do believe one of them will be potentially announced on Thursday. So check my Twitter this Thursday, unless something throws off their plans. That's going to be exciting.
That's great. I forgot to mention, I did want to mention your Marvel's Indigenous Voices that came out in November. I of course had to get the variant Jeffrey Verege cover, which is incredible, which has Danny Moonstar on the cover, which was the character did you choose that character as a character?
Yeah, and I actually asked to write Danny because as a kid or a teenager, middle school on, I was a big X-Men fan. And I really liked her because I was a goth well, I guess I'm still a little bit, but hardcore when I was a teenager. And her power is just to be able to show people like images of their greatest fear, and this is a mirage. I really connected with that. So it was fun to write her.
Cool.
Yeah.
Real quick, this was a question from Facebook. Ryan already answered it. Empire Strikes Back and Prometheus. But Darcie, what's your favorite science fiction movie?
It's hard to say favorite, but I really enjoyed Annihilation. I'm a horror fan, so that was super creepy, and I liked it. I liked also the philosophical angle of it too, and the bear monster still is some of my favorite like practical effects.
Cool. All right, Nanobah. We've been talking a lot about the Sixth World, but I know you've done a lot of other work, including documentary film, including music videos. I watched the couple by Laura Ortman last night. Those were fantastic. I really enjoyed those. How did you kind of move from speculative fiction to documentary and music videos, and then what are you working on now and in the near future?
So I wanted to give a fun fact that I just learned this year, that the Ewoks were actually inspired and named after the Miwok tribe, right? And who live in the redwoods. Am I right? I thought that was so cool. And I remember one in Star Trek Voyager, wasn't there an Apache character? Anyone remember that? Do you know what I'm
Oh,
talking
what's
about? Is
the
that the
name
wrong
of?
show?
That's a
I
deep-
know
that's a
there
deep
was a
cut.
character who was native who had like tattoos. I don't know if he was Apache.
You,
Oh, it's
I
been so
believe
long.
so, because I was like,
Oh, I've
I still
got to
remember
look into
I could be wrong,
that.
We could throw that out to our
Anyway.
Facebook audience. I bet somebody knows it.
but yes, so I've had the great fortune to work with Laura Ortman, who's a White Mountain Apache musician. She kind of has her own, I would say her own style, her own genre, kind of experimental. She plays the violin amongst many other instruments. She also sings sometimes, and I met her when I was living in New York. I went to film school in New York, and she lives in Brooklyn. And she was scoring a film from like 1919, like a really old film, with her her bandmate at the time. And so I was at one of these screenings where I met her, and then through the years, we just stayed friends. And we were like, we should do a music video. And we had met Jacques Soto, who he was principal ballet dancer at the New York City Ballet for many, many years. And luckily we were like, let's ask him, will he do it? And he said yes. So the three of us came together and came up with the idea for the first one, I Lost My Shadow. And then we shot another one, My Soul Remainer. So I Lost My Shadow was shot in New York, and mainly in Brooklyn, where both Laura and Jock were living at the time. And we shot the second one in Eagle Nest, where Jock lives. And then we want to do a third one. So I'm hoping that we could. Oh, okay, I got the tribe wrong, I'm seeing in the notes. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. But yeah, so in terms of what I've been doing since then and the documentary work is I just sort of take opportunities as they come along. And it's, shooting a film is really expensive, especially sci-fi. So when I'm able to, and I have the support, and I find, although the music videos, we didn't have any money, we just did it for the love. So yeah, so I hope to continue to do that, but I'm also here in LA, and I don't know if anyone's seen Rutherford Falls yet. Sierra Onellis, the brilliant showrunner who's from Tucson, did that show with Ed Helms and another producer. And then there's another native show being shot in Oklahoma right now with Sterling Harjo. I can't remember the name. It's Reservation something. Someone can, Facebook, can you tell me the name of his show? Reservation Dogs, thank you.
Reservation Dogs.
Thank you, Darcie. So there's more and more opportunities coming Native people's way, at least in this town. And a lot of the stuff that we were talking about before, people are like, Natives are dead. The ones that exist don't have any money. So therefore you don't deserve to make anything because it's not going to make me any money, says the gatekeeper. So slowly things are changing, and oh, cool. I hope to keep making work, and just, I have a few scripts in mind. None of them are really futuristic, but I also would like to direct. So any sort of directing opportunities that come my way, if they happen to be a sci-fi project, I would love it. I'm involved with a short film called Still by Natalie Engelbert, who is she's an actress and a writer. She's actually originally from Tucson. So it's set out there. It's a non-native subject. So hopefully we'll be shooting that sometime this year.
Very cool, thanks. So there was one more question I think that came through on Facebook. Thoughts on the optimism found in Indigenous futurism stories. Not exactly sure specifically what the question is addressing, but I get what they're talking about in terms of the sense of optimism for a more optimistic future for Indigenous peoples. Can you guys comment on that at all in terms of whether that's appealing or whether that's something you think about?
I think the optimism it lies in like the survival, being able to, like I was talking about before, the earth is going to be here long after we will. So that is kind of like ties into respect for Mother Earth and understanding that that if we take care of her, she'll take care of us, and balance, respect, all that stuff that deals with that stuff. We have to in turn take that into the future, which we are not doing right now at the moment. Which, like I was talking about before, if you don't take care of the planet, so I think the optimism is if we keep those traditional indigenous ways of life and thought and practices and stuff like that, the culture, and take it into the future, that's where we will be able to survive and maybe even save the rest of humanity. Who knows? So that's the optimism right there.
Thanks, Ryan. Darcie, Nanobah, want to comment on that, or any other final thoughts before we wrap it up today?
Yeah, I have to say this is all very personal. So this response applies to me and not necessarily everyone, but just the way I was raised from my mother's side. I say that because on my father's side, I'm Irish. And the Irish have a wonderful storytelling tradition too, but really my mother was the one who, so I feel more comfortable telling stories from the Lipan Apache perspective than the Irish perspective, just because I was raised in one culture more than the other. But from my mother's side, she taught me that the art you put into the world is kind of connected to you in a way that should be respected. And I just can't bear to put anything nihilistic into the world, because I feel like not only would that be like a bruise on my soul, but also I want whatever art I create, even if it's sad, even if it's hard, I want there to be a kind of a nugget of hope, at least, if not more. Just because I am aware of the impact it will have on other people. And I want my art at least to make a positive impact on some lives. So that's just all very personal, but yeah, I won't write anything that is just completely hopeless, even though as a horror fan, I read a lot of stuff like that. So I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not something that I want to put out into the world.
Thanks, Darcie. Nanobah, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because when I was setting, the other thing I wanted to do with the sixth world is to have something optimistic, because it's so easy to think a few years in the future, it's going to be devastation, floods, fires, all this stuff, and just horrible. So thinking from a Navajo perspective of we're in the fourth world, or some people say fifth world, or whatever your tradition where you're from says we're at, we're going to keep going. We're going to go to the next world. Even with this, when this world is done and destroyed, we're going to keep going on. And I believe that, like Ryan was saying, the United States is not going to be here forever, but we will. We're still going to be here. We're still going to be on our land. And then what,
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for those final comments. Thank you all for being here today. This was really, really fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. We got some great questions from the Facebook viewers. I'm really looking forward to work from all of you coming soon. And once again, thank you all of our viewers for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I certainly did. And happy May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. May the 4th be with you all. And have a great day. Thanks again, everybody.